You're listening to The World at 8 with Lynn Mozart. The World at 8, the number one in nationalist news.
Highlights of the news today, Monday 8th of September 2014. Rapist Sarbaz Najmadeen Ali allowed to walk away from Hove Crown Court. At least 60 more young girls from care homes feared victim of new Asian sex ring. Net widens in Glasgow teenage sex abuse inquiry. Girls preyed on by grooming gang 31 strong operating in Calderdale, West Yorkshire. Germany won't tolerate Sharia police. Thought for the day, the same old story. And finally, 2 for 1 day Monday. UK news. Rapist Sarbaz Najmadeen Ali just walks away from Hove Crown Court. Sarbaz Najmadeen Ali, 28, from St Leonards-on-Sea, Sussex, was convicted in his absence of the rape, attempted rape and sexual assault of a 23-year-old man from Hastings. He was found guilty after disappearing from Hove Crown Court during the lunch break on Thursday, Sussex Police said. An arrest warrant has been issued since officers have been unable to trace him. Ali was granted bail which allowed him to leave the dock during the lunch break, but not the court building. Detective Constable Julian Stokes said, "There is no evidence to suggest that Ali will commit further offences while he is at large, but we need to find and arrest him as quickly as possible. The jury has found him guilty of these nasty offences, but his victim does not have justice yet, as Ali has not been punished." World at 8. Ali needs finding and deporting. At least 60 more young girls from care homes feared victim of new child sex ring. At least 60 more vulnerable young girls from care homes are feared to have fallen victim to Asian gangs in yet another child abuse case shaming northern towns, reports the Sunday People. Shocking new allegations of grooming, beatings and sex attacks by a paedophile ring are centred on Accrington and Preston, Lancashire, and St Helens, Merseyside. They follow similar scandals in Rochdale, Lancashire and Rotherham, South Yorkshire, and bear chilling similarities. One terrified teenager said she was doused in petrol by a thug in Preston, a punishment also reported in Rotherham. Gangs of men, often taxi drivers, are said to have plied girls in care with drink and drugs before raping them, while social services and police allegedly failed to protect them. Cabbies were also found guilty of abuse in Rotherham, a whistleblower told the Sunday People last week. One girl in the St Helens scandal, 14 when the abuse started, even claimed she was held captive as a sex slave. The girl, now in her 20s, said, "I went into care at 14. Staff turned a blind eye while I was groomed, battered, kidnapped and raped. They did nothing." She first went to the Dyke Nook home near Accrington in 1999. She recalled Asians hung around outside. They knew the staff, most were taxi drivers who offered us lifts to school. She soon learnt the men wanted sex and were brutal, if denied it. Lancashire Police have been investigating her claims since 2012. A spokesman said, "We are committed to preventing child abuse, helping victims and bringing offenders to justice." Louise Taylor, in charge of Lancashire's Children's Services, said, "We are aware of the distressing allegations. Combating sexual exploitation of children is given the highest priority." World at 8. Yup, I can see that. The past 30 years no stone has been left unturned in bringing these bastards to justice. It was well known the so-called staff at these care homes were paid to turn a blind eye. But even in this report the word Muslim or Pakistani has not been mentioned. How can a people who will not name the abusers do something about it? Net widens in Glasgow teenage sex abuse inquiry. Another person has been reported to prosecutors as part of an ongoing investigation into the alleged sexual abuse of vulnerable children. Scotland on Sunday last week revealed details of Operation Dash, which is looking into the exploitation of teenagers in Glasgow, many of whom are thought to have absconded from children's homes. The investigation carried on the work of Operation Cotswold, which was set up in 2011 and focused on a group of Middle Eastern asylum seekers in the north of the city. At least 26 potential victims were identified and files were sent to the Procurator Fiscal, but no prosecutions were brought in. It's understood vulnerable young girls were found in the home of one or more suspects, but many identified as at risk did not see themselves as victims and were reluctant to cooperate, making it difficult to gather evidence and get the case to court. Police said 22 people have now been reported to the Procurator Fiscal as a result of Operation Dash. World date. There again, Middle Eastern asylum seekers in the homes of, well, I never. How come firstly these a-holes have homes in Scotland which to operate from, and I'm sure it isn't just the so-called vulnerable girls either. Since 2011, do they need any more time, do you think? This should be called Operation Dash Off. Girls preyed on by grooming gang, 31 strong, operating in Calderdale, West Yorkshire. Detectives in West Yorkshire are investigating a grooming gang of 31 men that preyed on 2 girls, say police. Members of the gang, which operate in the Calderdale area, are on bail, as are 28 members of another gang in Keighley that allegedly groomed and abused 4 girls. Police said they couldn't give further details because the investigations were ongoing, but the case has revealed the scale of the problem of child sexual exploitation. This was highlighted last month with the public publication of a report into the grooming and abuse of mainly white girls in Rotherham, South Yorkshire, by gangs of men mostly of Pakistani origin. The report by Alexis J., a former chief social work advisor to the Scottish Government, found that at least 1,400 children had been victims of sexual exploitation over 16 years. World date. All the reports or investigations in the world are not going to prevent or make bearable what has happened to these young females. It is all too little, too late. Do you see the GBP getting rid of Islam and huge enclaves of Pakistani males who have made this country and their culture endemic in the UK? European news. Germany won't tolerate Sharia police. The German government has strongly criticised nightly patrols in the city of Wuppertal by men calling themselves Sharia police. The 33-year-old behind the patrols claimed that their goal was only to raise attention. Conservative members of Chancellor Angela Merkel's coalition put forward a united front at the weekend against recent developments in the city of Wuppertal. Interior Minister Thomas de Maizière said civilians wearing uniforms bearing the logo Sharia police could not simply start patrolling German streets. The Salafist scene includes many German-born converts. The groups reportedly hovered around sites like discotheques and gambling houses, telling passers-by to refrain from gambling and alcohol. Wuppertal's police have begun pressing charges. Sharia law is not tolerated on German soil, de Maizière told Mass Circulation Daily Bild on Saturday. Nobody can take it upon themselves to abuse the good name of the German police. Justice Minister Heiko Maas meanwhile told Bild that the state alone was responsible for the administration of justice in Germany. It was obvious, Maas said, that any illegal parallel system of law enforcement would not be tolerated. World date. Well, let's hope they put their money where their mouth is. World news. No change in Ukraine, no change in Syria, no change in Iraq, no change anywhere, and Comoran, the EU, the UN or NATO can do absolutely nothing, so nothing worth the nationalist news on the worldwide front today. Thought for the day. Same old story. Whilst our people are being pretty much ignored, also the subject of partial ignorance is the plight of the Kenyan children being farmed out for sexual purposes. Does this ring a bell? So despite all the petitions against this, very little is said about the actual root of the problem, and of course it is Islam. The same Arabs who sold African slaves are still doing so, and in fact have never stopped. Of course this sell-off doesn't apply so much if the African converts, which is why Africans are converting at the rate of knots to avoid being killed or sold into slavery. So whilst the European ships are not sitting in wait to take on board their quota of black gold, the internet and an African Muslim mafia has taken its place. We are used to the tales of the Chinese who for hundreds of years have farmed and brought in their future generations into the countries they flee to, and the Far Eastern Asians, the Thais etc. who would sell 2 flies crawling up a wall for baht or dollars. the Indian subcontinent who had child marriages thousands of years ago and haven't seen fit to alter it, as well as their Muslim counterparts, for whom it is still all very good business in their colonies. But the African slave trade has taken a nosedive, news-wise, when it isn't the Europeans cashing in on past mistakes and apologising out of the wazoo for something which is still going on and is an endemic part of the Islamic culture. So the Kenyans, while still frantically converting, are finding themselves the hub of sex gang slavers on an unequalled level. Not only are the Kenyan children being sold, but very young females and males from the outlying regions of Somalia are being brought in. For the most part, as in our towns and cities for the last 35 years, most of these children are non-Muslim. As around 60% of the coastal region of Kenya is now Muslim and well under the Al-Shabaab thumb, the slavers are having to go far afield in their search for very young virgin bodies which sell very well in the open market as well as to their own people. It also said vehicles transporting cat to Somalia return to Kenya with young Somali girls who often end up in brothels in Nairobi's Eastleigh and Mombasa. By 2009, more than 50,000 children had become prostitutes, according to End Child Prostitution in Kenya. The numbers must be very high now. The poverty in Mombasa and the rest of the country serves as the right incubator for thriving child sex tourism, said ECPIK National Coordinator Rose Atieno Odhayambo. Children from poor family backgrounds are easy targets, with the promise for a better life. Child sex tourists come to Kenya because they believe that paedophilia is legally and culturally accepted there, but the country has stringent laws against that, said Ahmed Hussein, the Children's Services Director, formerly under the Ministry of Gender, Children and Social Development. Now, whilst condemning this practice, the real root of the problem, Islam, is being ignored, as it has been in the UK. You may say it isn't our country, so why should we bother? Well, you should bother, because it's this attitude that has prevented thousands of very young British girls being protected, and for the locals to regard it as a matter of growing up with Islam on one's doorstep. Still, the root cause is being hushed up in the UK and abroad, and the truth of the matter is that through all my research into sex slavery carried out in a certain manner in the UK and by another form of aggression abroad, the basic root is the cultural bias of Islam towards very young female children, whom it regards as fair game for both marriage, Muslim, or selling or pimping out for money, non-Muslims. It won't be until this ignorance of the religion of the people perpetrating this business is common knowledge and spoken about in the open that we or anyone will actually help or address the situation. Of course, Somalia is a growing Islamic state, and in last year Somalia's Al-Shabaab Islamists announced the creation of a Kenyan branch of the movement to be led by Sheikh Ahmed Imam Ali, the founder of the Shabab Allied Muslim Youth Centre. Sheikh Ahmed quickly indicated the group would pursue revenge for Al-Shabaab's loss of the port of Kismayo to the Kenyan military by calling for all means possible to be used to kill the infidels in Mombasa, Nairobi and across Africa. In Mombasa, the slightly older sex workers, as they are referred to, had taken to wearing the buibui, which is the African equivalent of the burqa. Said one woman, "I feel so embarrassed that sometimes I contemplate removing my buibui and throwing it away." The buibui has lost its respect, said Mariam Salma. Another resident, Asha Hussein, claims the sex workers are not native to Mombasa. They are not Muslims. Most are from Somalia and Ethiopia. They wear it to avoid public humiliation, she says. Lovely. Public humiliation from servicing your menfolk under duress. Such is the humility and forgiveness of Islam. It isn't until we Europeans understand and acknowledge the stance Islam takes towards non-Muslims and their subsequent treatment of them that we will know how to handle it. And the best way is not to allow any more migration from Muslim countries or Africa. Because these Africans can and will convert even over here, as the Lee Rigby killers show. Islam may not have any respect towards non-Muslims or Kafirs, but they will take anyone of any colour or ex-creed into the fold of Islam to swell the ranks of the Prophet. The same chance is not given for the poor underage children raped and pimped out. They are already outcasts from their own society, who either sells them for profit or out of desperation for food, so their chances of ever getting married or converting are virtually nil. Like their European equivalents, they will be put on the pill or aborted regularly to avoid the stigma of producing a child that no one wants or can feed. There is a place in Kenya, funded out of monies in Texas, USA, which houses ex-prostitutes and their babies. It is called Mercy House and it is Christian run. On seeing some of the pictures of these babies themselves, holding babies, it makes one wonder how on God's green earth do we, in the West, even contemplate allowing Islam over the borders, let alone into your own country. It beggars belief that the global corporate agenda should consider parasites like Muslims to even be counted as human beings, let alone encouraged to breed anywhere and everywhere they land. I don't know who to dislike the most, us for putting up and shutting up, or the Muslims for taking advantage. Of course, the other side of allowing even more African Muslims in is the Ebola crisis, which will not just go away or be forgotten like Muslim sexual grooming gangs have and are. Ebola will come to this country, and if you look at the attitude of the average black migrant laughing and joking as they bring their diseases in, they don't have a care in the world. They will get over here, they will spread the disease, and we will help them to do so. We are like turkeys voting for Christmas. There is no worse racial or religious mixture in the world today than an African and a Muslim. One suffers from a self-deluding ignorance and the other is a self-deluding opportunist. And even our politicians are dithering about what to do that will make the rest of the world happy. They're not considering the great British public at all, and never have, and this applies to all the political parties, even UKIP, who have leapt on the Muslim bandwagon with all its veils and deceit. Talk about an oil slick covering most of England, and you'd be right. Anytime anyone brings up underage prostitution in Islam, you can bet someone is offended. Be it a liberal or Marxist twitbrit or a Muslim himself, you'll find the rhetoric exactly the same. We mustn't be racist or reactivist or, heaven forbid, anti-Islam or Islamophobic. Now, can anyone with half a brain tell me why we shouldn't be thus? Haven't enough lessons been meted out to the GBP? Haven't enough babies been raped? Haven't enough houses or properties been taken over? Don't they have enough mosques yet? Don't they have enough MPs or councillors yet? Doesn't the Brit press quake in their boots at the thought of actually acting against these bastards? Haven't the plods taken enough from the white nationalists whilst ignoring the horrific happenings promoted by Muslims and non-whites? Haven't we had enough yet? What the hell does it take to make a so-called nationalist Englishman stop going to Spain for retirement, eating takeaways, buying foreign-made crap, using Asian-owned shops, using taxis, and not at least being seen to support what local or British-made or owned goods we have left? Why do we, out of all of the world, continue to harbour and look after these pests in our midst who are spreading like foot and mouth throughout the land? What will it take? Just one more African pushing a huge trolley out of your supermarket? Just one more Muslim demonstration against being offended? Or the school classroom you've just collected your child from sporting a black and illiterate teacher? It may take just one more local beheading, or one more black on white crime, or perhaps just one more little girl for the pot. But then as long as it isn't yours, why should you care? X Factor's back again. Just hide behind your TV and Chinese dog or cat takeaway and ignore the bloody great extension going up next door being worked on by Muslims for Muslims, and just hope that the next African you see won't be the one carrying Ebola. And you know what they say about hope, don't you? It springs eternal from the human breast. Well, almost. And finally, 2 for 1 Day Monday. Here's your English lesson for the day. Complete or finished. During a recent linguistic conference held in London, England, and attended by some of the best linguists in the world, Shamsundar Balgomin, a Guyanese linguist, was the presenter when he was asked to make that distinction. The question put to him by a colleague in the erudite audience was this: some say there is no difference between complete and finished. Please explain the difference in a way that is easy to understand. Mr. Balgobin's response: when you marry the right woman, you are complete. If you marry the wrong woman, you are finished. And if the right one catches you with the wrong one, you are completely finished. His answer received a 5-minute standing ovation. And the Iranian ambassador to the UN had just finished giving a speech and walked out into the lobby of the convention centre, where he was introduced to a US Marine general. As they talked, the Iranian said, "I've just one question about what I've seen in America." The general said, "Well, anything I can do to help." The Iranian whispered, "My son watches this show called Star Trek, and in it there is Kirk, who is Canadian, Chekhov, who is Russian, Scotty, who is Scottish, Uhura, who is black, and Sulu, who is Japanese. But there are no Muslims. My son is very upset and doesn't understand why there aren't any Iranians, Iraqis, Afghans, Egyptians, Palestinians, Saudis, Syrians or Pakistanis on Star Trek." The general leaned forward to the Iranian ambassador and whispered in his ear, "That's because it takes place in the future." You've been listening to The World at 8. I am Lynn Mozart and I wish you all a very good night.